Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. We're delighted you're with us today. Brad is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. And if you'd like to call us, I've got the call screen up and running. 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. Gwyneth Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Welcome, Gwyneth.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
Well, I don't know how I am. I'll tell you why. I've had a restless night thinking about all those second graders who want to compete in the Art Olympics, who want to compete with the portraits of Barack Obama's official portrait and Michelle's official portrait. Those are two of the, worst uses for a piece of canvas, ink, and brushes that I've ever seen. Absolutely horrible. Have you seen those things?
I have, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So Barack is sitting in a chair, right? And Rich Sheehan yesterday said it best. It looks like, he's got all these leaves around him. Looks like poison ivy. That is horrible. He's just sitting in a chair. His hands are folded across his lap. His hands are way out of proportion. Way out of proportion. This is according to Smithsonian.com. They say the Obama's official portraits break new ground with their boldness. Oh man, a picture-perfect reveal ceremony was by turns heartfelt and humorous. I guess it is humorous. But I don't think they were supposed to be a joke. I think they were supposed to represent some kind of a likeness to Barry Soetoro and his roommate Michelle. But so, what was your take on this?
Okay, Alex Jones pointed out something quite interesting yesterday about Barry's picture. He said it looks as if it's been painted by a Chinese oil mill, which is they have whole cities in China where they are set aside specifically for doing oil paintings, okay? And he said if you look carefully at it, you can tell that the background has actually, a stock background that's in tiles like you would put in with a computer, okay? But it's obviously been painted. So what they've done is that they've put a background in using a certain artistic method. You make a slide and then you project the slide onto a wall or whatever, and then you paint around it. Okay, I think that's the simplest way of doing it. They often use the same method for making murals. So you have like the picture of the mural that you want, and you photocopy it onto acetone, and then you put the acetone on an overhead projector and project the image onto a wall, and then you paint it onto the wall. and sign writers and mural painters and all of these people. It looks as if they've basically got a tiled stock photo background.
Mm-hmm. They're horrible.
That's the
Both
method that they've used. Well, it's cheap and tacky. And then Michelle's background, they've just run out of time. They haven't put a background in on that one at all. They've just
maybe the bulb in
the
bulb in the projector. Yeah. Maybe the bulb in the projector blew out. Yeah, Guineith, we've got quite a delay here today, so it's a little difficult. I'm running about 3/4 of a second from my studio to headquarters at GCN, and we're probably running at least that out to you. So we're probably running between you and me maybe 2 seconds, 2.5 seconds. So I just want to let you know that it seems like there's an extra delay today. But no, you're right. They look horrible, and that's very interesting because I've never seen such a tacky background. It really is tacky. It looks like poison ivy has. Yeah, it looks like poison ivy has taken over a wall, and someone superimposed or dropped a chair there, and then dropped Obama on the Barry on the chair. It looks unnatural. The whole thing looks really, really strange. And then it looks like the projector bulb blew out, so they couldn't do the background for Michelle, and so the background is just white. But I was reading some comments about this. I didn't. Do you think it's a dress or do you think it's a tent? I was reading some comments about.
That's the worst dress I've ever seen in a portrait.
Well, I think it was a tent. I think it was like, parts of a circus tent, scraps from a circus tent sewn on to a white canvas circus tent because it's got, a little bit of color in it. But yeah, it's the word. Who would wear something like that? Really? Nobody I know would wear anything like that. So I can't imagine even Michelle saying, I'll tell you what, this is my favorite dress. This, when I go down in history as being the worst first lady in the galaxy, I'd like to be wearing my favorite dress. I can't imagine her. Class, I will post another link to this on the website so you can see just how awful this is. I think it'll be sensational for people to go and look at it and laugh. Other than that, I can't imagine why anybody would want to go and see this and call it art. But it does look like the projector bulb blew, and they said, where are we going to get another bulb? And they couldn't figure that out, so they said, well, let's just leave the background just white. But one of the comments I read about this was, I think it was hysterical, and it said something to the effect that, Michael Jackson paid a lot of money for surgeries to become that white. And, now this is not a slight against black people. It's not a slight against black people. What it is it's not like her. She's not her natural color in this application of paint on canvas. She's not her natural color. Nothing looks right. The proportions don't look right. The hair doesn't look right. The dress doesn't look right. The background doesn't look right. I think not even the frame looks right. The frame for Michelle is just a real plain, thin rail. I don't know if it's aluminum, but it's kind of a modern frame. Barry's frame is more of a masculine, it's a blackish colored frame, somewhere between a very dark gray and black, but it's more masculine. But it is nowhere near the kind of framing that is befitting the CEO of United States of America Corporation. It's not. It's the size is way off. Everything is way off. Even the chair that Barry's sitting on, for some reason, to me, it looks like a second grader was painting this. It really does. And literally, if you want my real opinion, I would say this is a high schooler's attempt at painting for Michelle. That's what that really looks like. The proportions are that wrong. An artist who wants to be, or someone who wants to be an artist, in 10 or 15 years' time with lots and lots of practice ahead of them, that's what this representation of Michelle looks like to me.
Well, really I'll tell you what, if I hadn't gone to college and become a scientist, I would have done art school. And I did senior high school studio arts. And most of the people in the class with me went on to do college, arts degrees at college, doing fine arts, learning how to become oil artists and so on. That is not good enough. That painting of Michelle is not good enough for a senior high school folio for entry to college. If I was the art teacher and one of my students said, "Hey, I've got a painting here. It's going to be part of my folio for my college entry," I would tell them, "Go back and do some more work on it." For one thing, it needs a background. Mm-hmm. And for another thing, the skin is too artificial, it's too fake, needs to be worked up some more, needs more realistic color.
Yes. Yeah, the skin is one color or one tone. There's no variation in it.
The shading is just off.
Yes.
It's just too pale. It's and the shading of it looks striped. That's the term that we used to use. For shading, you should have a gradual gradation between light mm-hmm. and dark. But mm-hmm. that is just like real white streaks where the highlights are supposed to be, instead of gradually fading into the darker color.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking at Barry's hands, and he in this image that I'll post from SmithsonianMag.com. You look at Barry's hands, and you look at the hands. The image is a little larger. Well, let's say that it's lifelike in size. Well, the hands that are in the, we'll call it artist in quote rendering of Barry, the hands are about 1.5 times bigger than they really are. Yeah, and my question for that art student is, where'd you get the tent? Guineith Isaacs is with us, and we're going from one disaster to another. We were talking about the alleged artwork of Michelle and Barry. And we'll move on to the Dust Bowl. I've been doing some research about the dirty 30s, as they were referred to back in the history of the United States. It was, I would say, the worst man-made disaster prior to the nuclear experimentation and nuclear destruction of the planet. But the Dust Bowl started around the very early 1930s. And it lasted for an entire decade, till about 1939 when it just started to abate. And what happened was the government encouraged people to move to a land that hardly anybody wanted. And it was a land that was covered with buffalo grass. And the Homestead Act of 1862 provided settlers with 160 acres of public land. And that was followed by the Kincaid Act of 1904, and that enlarged the Homestead Act of 1909. So what we had was a massive influx of new, inexperienced suitcase farmers, as they were called, across the Great Plains. So the government encouraged planting of wheat, and so these farmers plowed up these native grasses that have been flourishing for thousands and thousands of years, called buffalo grass. And then the drought came. And then the soil which was plowed up went airborne. And the soil traveled thousands of miles. It traveled as far as the East Coast and out to the Atlantic Ocean. So it was even dusty in New York City and in Boston. And that's when it got a lot of attention, because people couldn't believe that inside an old farmhouse, in this Dust Bowl area in the Midwest, that there was so much dust that people were dying of dirt pneumonia or dust pneumonia. Children were dying because they were breathing this in, and they got sick, and they would just die. And it was horrible. It was an absolutely horrible time in the United States, and it was all man-made. 100% of it was man-made. It was a combination of greed, suitcase farmers who had no idea what they were doing, and the pursuit of gold, meaning money, the pursuit of money. And I wanted to ask you, Guineith, have you had anything like that in Australia, or do you have anything like that in Australia?
Unfortunately, yes.
Mm-hmm. Is it terrifying?
It's really, really not pleasant when it happens. A number of years ago, my husband, in a previous marriage, his marriage was on the point of, they had a new baby, but the marriage was not going well. And, he flew out of Melbourne together with his new wife to go to Sydney and their baby. And as they were leaving Melbourne, there was a great dust storm descended on the city. As they were on the plane leaving, and he saw it from the air. And there's photos of this particular dust storm out there, and it was absolutely horrifying. He felt that he had escaped the jaws of hell. Although the marriage went badly, and it ended eventually in the divorce courts after many years. But they, he said it was absolutely terrifying to see. Now, here in Australia, the topsoil that comes from the red centre is obviously red. That's what they call the whole interior of Australia, is the red centre. It's basically just about pure iron oxide, which is rust. And that's the soil that they have in the interior of Australia. Where we are, they have granite soils, although there are a lot of iron oxide soils and patches as well. And if we have bad years here, we certainly have dust storms around here. And bad years happen to be once in every 7 years or so.
Wow. Let's talk more about it when we come back. Guineith Isaacs is with us. Guineith, the worst dust storm in the United States happened on April 14th, 1935. And the reports on the news called the event Black Sunday. There was a wall of blowing sand and dust that started in the Oklahoma Panhandle and spread east. As many as 3 million tons of topsoil were blown off the Great Plains during Black Sunday. And it was quite horrific. And when I first moved to Missouri, I was talking to some of the farmers about, how many cows they had per acre. And they told me, no, it's not how many cows per acre, it's how many acres per cow. And they were telling me that you need about 4 acres to raise one cow. Yeah. And I thought, why is that? Land,
but it's probably about right.
Well, I asked them why. And they said, well, because of the grass. And I said, what do you mean? They said, well, there's only like 4 to 6 inches of soil on top of the rock or the hard pan here in this part of the world. I said, what are you talking about? When we excavated for our house, we dug down and we have 3 feet of topsoil. I said, wow. No way. Well, here's why I'm mentioning that. Now, we don't have it everywhere. But I have a feeling that we have it where the where the farm used to have these little dips. You know, our farm is kind of rolling and it's got a lot of rocks, but there are areas where there are dips. And I have a feeling that the dust and the topsoil and the sand that blew from, Kansas and Oklahoma as it was blowing east, it got stuck in these low dips. And that's why we have 3 feet of topsoil in certain areas. Now, what I want to do is do further research and find out if that really is the case. But, I mean, there was an enormous shifting of the topsoil. And it was because farmers literally plowed up their fields, and then it didn't rain for years. Yeah. And because of that, it was so dry, and the winds would kick up, and the winds would just blow the soil. Now, what we do to prevent erosion of what topsoil we do have here, we plant grass everywhere, okay? And the idea is the grass is a filter, and it holds the roots of the grass plants hold down the soil so the soil doesn't take off. I mean, we're really careful. Grass? No. We have Kentucky bluegrass. We have other grasses. We have warm season grasses, cool season grasses. We mix them all together. So no matter what time of the year it is, there's grass there. And then we put white clover, ladino clover in the fields so that there's more nitrogen to keep. If someone asks me, what do we do? I mean, I usually say I'm in the methane business, the gas business, because we have cows. But and then I refine it a little bit.
You're in the lawn business.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. We are in the grass growing business. Yep. That's what we do. We grow grass, and then the highest and best use for that grass would be to plant some cows on there, and then to raise the cows with the grass. So really, we are grass farmers with a little side business of raising cattle. But this dust bowl was so bad that people got lost. Children would go walk from school, the same path that they've taken year after year, and they became so disoriented because they couldn't see. The landmarks were covered up with dirt that blew in, and they would find these children dead the next day just from walking home from school. Yeah. And here's a terrible thing. In class, you can prevent. We do talk about what do you do about it, and here's a scenario that is pretty horrifying. So the children are at school and the dust blows in, and the parents panic. So the parents race from the farm to the school, but the children had already left to go home. So the parents can't find the children. The children get back to the house. There's no parents there. Now everybody's worried about everybody. Now you can prevent that from happening. And what you do is you literally inform. If you're going to go to town, you tell those at home the path that you're going to take. So that someone does need to come find you. Right. I'm going by path number 1, or, the highlighted on the map, and everybody has the same map. I'm going to take the blue route, the pink route, or the yellow route, as highlighted on the map with a highlight marker. Okay? You can do that. So what you need to do is make sure that everybody knows where you are, and that's what we do. Like if one of us goes into town to get some supplies, we tell the others where we're going, each stop along the way, when we plan to be home, okay? And that's in case somebody needs to find us. Yeah. And that can happen.
I'll tell you what, we do something similar here. When my children were younger teenagers, they used to whinge, moan, and complain because I used to say, well, they'd be going out, and I'd say, well, where are you going? And they'd say, oh, we're just going out for a bike ride. What? Where are you going on your bike ride? And at that time, they didn't understand that it wasn't Mum being nosy. It was, if something went wrong, I would have to know where to look for them. And, I had to explain to them, listen, if something goes wrong, I need to know what direction you've headed, what road you've taken, okay? And because otherwise, I could be looking for quite some time, and there was a poor lady who lives not very far from where we are, and she occasionally goes to the same church that we go to sometimes. And she's a friend of ours, and her son went out for a motorcycle ride one afternoon and didn't return home. And his mother was looking for him for days, and she eventually found him. His motorcycle had come off the road, and he had hit a eucalyptus tree and been killed instantly. But after 3 days in the Australian sun, it was a very, very unpleasant sight for the poor woman to have to deal with. And, they had to obviously bury him, and I went to the funeral. We sat up the back, and no matter how much perfume they put out in that room, there was no disguising the fact that the corpse was in a very, very poor state. They didn't have an open coffin viewing, obviously. But this is why we say you need to tell people where you're going and what road you're taking, especially if you're in an area where you have things like dust storms, ice storms. If it's a arid or a semi-arid biome where you get very, very hot temperatures, very, very cold temperatures, people need to know where you are, and you need to tell. If you're a young person, a teenager or whatever, you need to tell people where you are and when you're planning to be back. And something, I don't think that they really took me seriously. Maybe until this young man died. And I said his mother didn't know where to look for him. She was all over the country roads in a frantic state. And she wouldn't have been able to save his life because the coroner said he was killed instantly as soon as he came off his motorcycle. But I say to my boys, if I'm going out on a horse ride, I'm going out on a horse ride, and this is the road I'm taking. I'm going to X location in the forest, and I'm going to stay on Y road. Okay? And we all know that we've been here for almost 6 years. Well, yes, it is 6 years now. We've been here for 6 years now. We know all the little bush tracks through the forest. And that's for the very same reason, so that if I don't come home, they know where to look for me. And, I've had it sometimes where I've been delayed out on a horse ride, and I've come home after dark and met one of my children coming down the road, and they said, we just wanted to make sure you're okay, Mum. And I said, thank you very much for that, that's good, but we're all okay, we're just taking it slow. Because, sometimes if a horse just doesn't want to go fast, you just can't make it go fast. It's just got to go at whatever, especially at the end of a very, very, very long ride. Sometimes it just doesn't want to go fast, and you just got to understand.
Yeah. You mentioned you mentioned motorcycles. I've got a couple comments. I don't know a single person who has ridden motorcycles on the road who hasn't had an accident or a spill or gotten hurt. I don't know a single one. Is it the same in Australia?
Yeah. Motorcycles and country dirt roads are just really, really bad news, especially poorly maintained ones. And at one point, my boys were saying, we're going to get motorcycles. Mum, I said, please don't. And then this happened with this young man, and I said to my sons, because we all knew the family, I said, this is why I said, please, no motorcycles. I would actually rather have you on horseback than on a motorcycle.
Well, I took
people reckon horses are dangerous. But motorcycles, in my humble opinion, on a dirt road in a country area are far more dangerous than horses.
And make it even worse by adding some automobiles around in the mix. Now you've got people on cell phones not paying attention to the motorcycles. Got a couple more comments about motorcycles and four-wheelers when we come back. Guineith Isaacs is with us. I'm Vin Finelli. This is USA Prepares. So we're talking about the dangers of motorcycles, and Guineith, I want to share with you my thoughts on that. So it seems to me that motorcycles are a great way to get killed. And automobiles and trucks have blind spots. And the operators of the vehicles, the trucks and automobiles, are often distracted by loud radios, music, other people in the vehicle, horsing around if they're young people, cell phones, and automotive electronics like navigation devices and so forth. So it's really kind of dangerous to be on the road with larger vehicles like trucks and cars if you're on a motorcycle. Now, too often, people on motorcycles are hard to see. Why? Because they wear dark clothes. I mean, what are they thinking for the most part? Not everybody wears dark clothes, but, black helmets, brown helmets, dark red helmets, dark clothes. Motorcycles, have small lights compared to other vehicles. And they don't necessarily have reflective strips. Put all that together, and it's pretty dangerous for the motorcycle operator in an environment of automobiles and trucks. Now, on the dirt roads that you're talking about, when they get a little rain on them, they're slippery, there are rocks to hit, and they can make you lose your balance, and you can fall off your motorcycle and break limbs, legs, necks, and have serious damage to your body. Well, What I did was when our son was 3 years old, I thought, we ought to get him a motorcycle. And so by the time he was 4, we got one. And I got what's called a Honda Z50. It's a little tiny motorcycle. It's got small wheels. It's got a kickstarter and an automatic clutch. And so for $300, I got the motorcycle and the helmet for him. And, he already knew how to ride a bicycle, and we lived on a farm, so I took him up to the top of the hill on our driveway, and I said, why don't you try riding this? I'll hold it with you, and, we'll just kind of coast down the hill. I didn't like it. And so then what I did was I helped him start it, and then he sat on it, and he'd rev the engine, and he'd rev the engine. He thought that was pretty cool. And ultimately, that same day, he would coast down the hill all by himself. And then he would coast down the hill by himself with the engine running. But he got kind of sick of pushing it up the hill because it was, it was about a quarter of a mile. And so ultimately he thought, let me just try it. And then we couldn't get him off it. After that, we couldn't get him off it. Now, the reason I did all that was I wanted him to know about braking. I wanted him to know about friction. I wanted him to know about skidding, traction. I wanted him to learn about gears. All of those things in a safe way. So he would go and check the cows on the farm, and so we bought, that Honda Z50, then we bought a Honda 80, then we bought a Honda 100, then we bought a Yamaha RT 180. So all of our children had motorcycles, and they'd ride them all over the farm. Now, does this sound extravagant? The answer is no, because if you buy them right, you can always sell them for what you paid for them, or maybe a little bit more. And that's the kind of thing that we did. So all of our children have experience, know how to ride motorcycles, and they know about the dangers. No one has fallen, no one's gotten hurt. However, one day, and then we moved on to four-wheelers, because I thought four-wheelers were a lot safer. So our son was in...
It's a very, very common myth. They're actually not.
Right. And that's what I'm going to tell you next.
Especially not on a slope.
Yeah. So we had a four-wheeler. Actually, we had two of them. And our son had a friend come over from the high school. They were, buddies. And so he said, can we take out the four-wheelers? And I said, Does your friend know how to ride a four-wheeler? Oh, yeah, rides one all the time. Okay? No racing around, no jumping, no skidding, none of that, right? Right. So I talked to both of them. Oh, yes, Mr. Finelli. Oh, yeah. Next thing I know, two boys are coming back. They're walking back, and that boy, who was a visitor on our farm, flipped the four-wheeler. Flipped it.
Yep.
Now, they only can do that by going... Yeah, and that's easy to do when you go too fast and you ride it unsafely. You don't pay attention, you don't know the terrain, and you do stupid things. And that's what he did. And that was the first and last time that boy has ever visited our farm. Never to come back. We'll be right back after these few short commercial announcements. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked, hour number 2 of the USA Prepares. We're talking with Guineith Isaacs about the dangers of motorcycles and four-wheelers. So here's another story. By the way, the young high schooler who rode our four-wheeler actually damaged it by flipping it. And I really didn't appreciate that. I didn't appreciate him telling me that, he was going to be careful. He was using our property, not his. He was reckless and careless with it. And that's why he's never been back to the farm, because he lied to me and he abused the privilege. Okay, he was reckless and careless with my property, and I can't understand that. If I were in someone else's vehicle, I would be way more careful than I am even with my own. Not that I'm not careful with my own, I am, but what I'm saying is it's unacceptable to behave that way. So here's another story, Guineith. There's a teenager. I know this man. He's now a man, but he was a teenager at the time, and he was riding. He's from a well-off family. He was riding his family four-wheeler on a neighbor's farm. He was just going in an area that he hadn't been before, and the farmer had strung a cable between two trees on a path through the woods, and the purpose of this was to keep vehicles out, to keep people from trespassing on his paths.
Land.
Yeah,
yep.
It was really simple. And so this young man on the four-wheeler came zooming along, bang, hits this cable. Not with the four-wheeler, not with the chest, but with his neck.
Oh, my gosh.
He's
very lucky he wasn't beheaded.
Absolutely correct. So to this day, he still has a scar. And so how do you address that? Well, I've talked to some young people, and they say things like when they slide off the road and into the ditch, well, I was late, and, I'd never been there before, and, it was a dangerous curve. They don't say, you know what, I had no idea where I was going, I hadn't been there before, and I was using caution. They don't say things like that. They blame it on the road. They blame it on the conditions. They don't say I was operating this vehicle too fast for the conditions. And that's really what it was. In both cases, these two young men, one on our four-wheeler, one on his four-wheeler, were operating in an unsafe manner. They really were. I got to tell you that I ride a four-wheeler around the farm all the time. I'll tell you what it is. I have an Arctic Cat, four-wheel drive, single-cylinder four-wheeler. Okay, that's mine. And I bought it used. The guy sold it.
No one else gets to ride it.
Well, yeah, it's kind of true. Now,
Good
Mrs. Finelli, Mrs. Finelli has one. She's got a Kawasaki 250. It's a real old one, and she loves it. Sometimes I'll hop on with her. She'll hop on with me. But we don't go racing around and doing stupid things for a lot of reasons. One, we don't want to get hurt. Two, we want that piece of equipment to last and last and last. And if you buy one used, yep.
Also, if you race around on them, you're going to scare the cattle.
Right. So we use them as farm equipment class. I talk about farm or tax deductions. In our case, the four-wheeler, the tires, the replacement parts, those are all tax deductions. Now, legitimate tax deductions for us, and they can be for other businesses as well. But we feel that we need them to check the cattle to be quick. Now, sometimes we take the Jeep. That's another tax deduction. But the reason we do that is, depending on the conditions, depending on what we're carrying, it's more fuel efficient to take a four-wheeler. It's more time efficient to take the Jeep if we're carrying some heavy things, fewer trips. So, we use our judgment. And by the way, if you buy a Jeep at the right price, I'm talking about a Jeep, Jeep. If you buy one of those, I've found that you can buy it, keep it for years and years, and then sell it for as much or more than you paid for it. No question about that.
They're a collector's piece.
Yeah.
Especially the old military ones.
Yeah, my first vehicle when I was learning how to drive was a 1954 Willys Jeep with a snowplow. So I paid for my Jeep by plowing snow. And it worked great. It was from, a gas station, when gas stations used to have Jeeps, and they plow their own, parking lots and service areas. So gas stations on the East Coast back in the 50s would have Jeeps with snowplows. So I bought one of those, and I used it to pay for the Jeep. So, I sold it for more than I paid for it, and I bought another one. I bought a one from the 70s, and I fixed it up and sold it for more than I paid for it. And then I bought another one, a Wrangler, and fixed it. That was actually, I'll tell you what I did. Our son, the guy who rode a motorcycle at 4 years old, was writing out his Christmas list. Now, he was a homeschooled young boy, and he was writing his Santa Claus Christmas list. And he said he wanted a Humvee. I looked at this list, and I kind of laughed. And he didn't know that Santa was a big lie. Well, he said, well, no, Santa can get me a Humvee. I said, I don't think so. As a matter of fact, I know that's not going to happen. I said, but your parents might be willing to buy you a used Jeep. Now, he's 10 years old. And I'm thinking, okay, we can use this on the farm, and he can drive it. Learn how to use the clutch and all that kind of stuff, and run farm errands all over the farm. So at 10 years old, he had a Jeep. And then he bought a trailer hitch for the Jeep so he could pull a trailer and pick up wood, with the Jeep. So our son has been driving since 10 years old. And
here in Australia, a lot of farmers actually do that. And we have a name in our country for such vehicles. They're called paddock bombs. Okay, a paddock being an Australian word for a field, and a bomb being an old car. So an old car that you drive around the fields is called a paddock bomb. I mean, I don't know if they have such words in America.
No, we just the most pleasant term that we have for a paddock bomb around here would be a farm truck. A farm truck means you can see through it. Where there used to be
holes in the floor.
Yeah, you can watch the road go by or the fields go by. Yeah, and so I guess we have a paddock bomb, which would be this Jeep, but it looks nice, and we paid very little for it. More than you can buy a Jeep for around $4,000, and then clean it up and sell it for $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. So it makes sense to me. I look at it as two things. One, as a small farm equipment investment, and then I look at it as a useful tool, and I look at it as a tax deduction. All three of those things, and we use them. Now, this particular Jeep that we have, this current Wrangler, is I think it's a 94, but it has about 94, and it has a couple 100,000 miles on it. So most people wouldn't want one. But when I bought it, I put a new a new hub on the front. I put shocks on it because they were shot, and I put new transmission lines on it, and that's pretty much all I did. And we use it every day. Every day that Jeep is fired up, and it just. So if the government says you don't use this Jeep on the farm, oh yeah, I do. As a matter of fact, not only do I use it on the farm, I've never registered it. I've never registered it with the taxation people. I'm saying this publicly. I'm saying I bought a vehicle and never registered it. And they say that if you buy a vehicle, you have to register it. And I'm saying, no, I don't.
No, it's not true.
I don't have to register it. I don't have to register it. Why do I have to register it? I'm not taking it on the road. I use it on the farm. It's none of their business. It's none of their business, and I'm not putting plates on it. So I just use this thing on the farm. And when our family comes out to visit us, or they'll hop in the Jeep and we'll take a ride. That's what we do on the farm.
Yep.
So one of the things that we wanted to talk about today, you want to talk about living off grid, and I was talking with one of our instructors last night, Bruce Kay. We were talking off air about off grid living and the electric bills that we have, and the best way to skin this cat. So tell us what your thoughts are about off-grid living, Guineith Isaacs.
Okay, with off-grid living, there's a saying. It used to be quite general in the culture. I don't know how common it is now, but I think the modern version of this saying is you've got to pay it forward. Okay, that means you can't just fly by the skin of your teeth. In our climate, the cold is not a huge problem. We have frost, and we might have about a quarter-inch thick ice that will settle onto. Maybe very occasionally the dog's bowls will freeze, okay, during the winter. But we just about never get snow, and if we do, it's just a mild dusting. Okay, so cold is not a real huge problem for us. And I have 20 acres of eucalyptus forest with branches dropping off the trees, because that's what eucalyptus trees do. They drop branches. And the trees here are hundreds and hundreds of years old. And they've been dropping branches for hundreds of years, and then they grow new branches at the top, and then they drop the old branches at the bottom, and then, that happens usually in a high wind, and you try and stay out of the forest in a high wind. You go up in the forest, and you collect the old branches. They don't even need to be seasoned, because, for one thing, they're full of eucalyptus oil, so they'll burn when quite green. And the other thing is, it's so hot here that they usually dry out in about a year on the forest floor anyway. But we'll talk more about that when we get back, because there are things that we do need to think about in this semi-arid climate that we live in.
We'll be right back. I've been looking around the studio during the break and trying to find a spot that would be suitable for a small version of Michelle and Barry's portraits. Maybe I could find one on the internet. But, I can't find a spot where I think I would like it. I can't find a single spot. So I guess I'm not going to be having Barry's and Michelle's image in the studio. I just have determined that it's not going to work. It's not going to work. So, Guineith, living in off-grid, presents challenges.
You've got to consider your climate. Okay, the things that are appropriate for you to do where you are not necessarily in a cold, temperate climate with reasonably high rainfall. Okay, I don't know how much rain you get there, but I'm estimating it would be over 1,000 millimetres per year. Okay, which would be around about 3 feet, so 36 inches. Okay, I'm estimating, and I might be wrong, that from what I've seen of films on there, of the Ozark Mountains, they're quite a moist place, and that they're certainly not a desert biome.
That's absolutely true.
But it's cold, and you probably have to think of wood.
We have to think of wood. And freezing cold, too.
You have to think that for a large part of the year it's going to be absolutely freezing cold. We don't have the absolutely freezing cold problem. We have the absolutely boiling hot problem. Okay? We have the fact that on average, 1 in 7 years is an extremely low rainfall year where we get less than 12 inches of rain in the year. That's less than 300 millimeters. Okay? 1 in every 8 years, we get over 800 millimeters of rain. Okay? Which is about 46 inches. So for us, it's a climate of extremes. It's extremely hot. In the winter, it gets frosty cold at night, and then it warms up to what would be a nice spring day, probably actually a nice summer's day where you are during the daytime in the winter. But actually, I'm probably exaggerating. It might get to 8 or 9 degrees Celsius during the day in the winter where we are. But our problem is water. And I've got a saying that I often say around here, nothing else happens if you don't have the water. Okay? With us, that falls into 2 categories. It's what I call agricultural water, which is the water that runs off the catchment area, which is the upper half of the farm. And it flows into the big main dam and also smaller dams that we have scattered around the block. And there's the domestic water, which flows off the roof catchment into the gutter and then into 2 large water tanks. Now, if you are planning on, you can buy rural land in somewhere like, I don't know, Arizona or New Mexico, and you can pay $5,000 for, 5-10 acres of land sometimes in Arizona or New Mexico. But you have to take account of the fact that that land is going to be in the middle of nowhere and it's going to have no water. And you're going to, I've been watching films over this last week of such blocks of land. And you have to be aware that the water might be, 20 miles away down a four-wheel drive track. And you have to take account that water's heavy and you don't want to tip a trailer over when you're bringing your water trailer home.
And it's hard work.
And towing across a rough bush track with a water trailer is going to be an interesting experience for you.
And dangerous.
You have to think of these
We'll be right
things.
back. Well, just a short comment. I have a 300-gallon water buffalo. It was a military surplus. It's a stainless steel tank mounted on a trailer with some large truck tires on it. And this 300 gallons doesn't seem like a lot. I mean, when you look at this little thing, you say, Josh, how heavy can it be? Well, if you fill that with water...
Heavy.
I wouldn't even think of trying to hook this up to a hitch, a trailer hitch on a Jeep Wrangler. I wouldn't even, a four-wheel drive Jeep Wrangler, I wouldn't even think of hooking this little water buffalo up to that because it'll push it all around. As a matter of fact, it pushes a 40-horsepower tractor all around. It weighs, when you fill it with just 300 gallons of water, which is enough for, 10 cows for a day, you're looking at 3,000 pounds. 3,000 pounds with this little tiny water buffalo.
The
By the way,
other thing you have to realize is that with a water trailer like that, people might be tempted to think that, I'll only half fill it. It doesn't quite work that way.
I know about that.
If it's full, then the weight distribution doesn't shift, okay? If it's half full, then if you put it on a wrong angle, you can actually tip the trailer over.
Right. Not only that, there are stories of young guys taking out a tractor trailer as a volunteer fireman. I know this very well. I was behind the wheel and did this. I took out a half-full, it looked like a gasoline tanker when I was a young guy.
Yep.
And I took it for a ride, and it was half full. And what happened when I went to stop, this 10-speed white tractor trailer, also known as a prime mover,
you would have had the tsunami wave on the inside.
I did.
Of the tank.
I did. And what
that would
happened,
be interesting.
Well, it was. What happened is I went to stop, and the water shifted from the back to the front, and this thing just...
It would have slammed.
It did. It slammed the truck forward, and then the water went backward, and then slammed it forward again, and bang, 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 bang. That was, I give it to you fast, but it was pretty frightening. So I just took it really slow and pulled it back into the firehouse. But, I know all about that.
Yeah.
Really dangerous.
You learn these things and you realize these things when you live off the grid, and if you have to do things like carting water. But what you've got to understand is, yes, you can get really, really, really cheap land, but it's going to be in the middle of nowhere, and you have to consider that it's not going to be developed, or it's going to be extremely neglected. You are going to have years and years and years and years of backbreaking toil before you can do anything with that land. And I speak as somebody who has been there and done that with a couple of farms.
Yeah, I thought you were talking about our farm.
In total, with three pieces of land.
Yeah, I thought you were talking about our farm.
Yeah, it's this farm that we have. I bought 20 acres for $95,000, which is about a third of the price at the time. Or actually, it was actually around about a tenth of the price of a suburban house in Melbourne at the time. Okay, but the farm was neglected. It hadn't been properly looked after for 10 years at that time. The fences were, in many places, simply non-existent. The troughs, it had a few troughs left, but the irrigation system, the system of pressure tanks and pumps and all of that and pipes, they were long gone. There was nothing. And I moved on to the place and felt the need to get a horse, and soon found myself carting buckets of water from the dam. And I said, this is no good. But me having the horse, and, this is the same horse, by the way, just in case anyone's wondering, it was a motivation for me to put the irrigation system in. That means you have on the dam wall, you put a 1,000 litre, 250 gallon food grade IBC cube. Okay, I'm sure they have those in America. This particular one had high fructose corn syrup in it, and you fill up you get a sump pump or some other pump, and you put that in the dam, hook it up to an electrical supply. You can get petrol pumps as well. You can get diesel pumps as well, but this particular one's electric. And by the way, if you're going to do that, you must have either a residual current device or some sort of short circuit breaker in the circuit that you use. Otherwise, it's a death trap. Okay, if any of the wiring goes wrong. Our inverter on our solar power system has such a short circuit safety switch built into the inverter. okay? And it's a sump pump. It's actually designed for pumping out basements, not for using in dams, but it works. And it was a bit cheaper than, the types of pumps that are normally sold to farmers for this purpose. And it has a 10-metre head. So, anyway, it's got a sump pump in the dam. It pumps the water up into the IBC cube, and there's a system of pipes that comes out of the IBC cube and flows through gravity to take water to all the troughs around about the farm, in the lower half of the farm. And at this time, the upper half of the farm is referred to as being catchment area. Okay, that means that the water falls on the upper half of the farm, and basically most of it flows into the dam. And at full capacity, the dam holds around about 3 million litres of water. And at the moment, we are probably around about 6 weeks from the rainfall starting for us. Because it's a semi-arid area, for 5 or 6 months of the year, we have very, very little rain. And you have to take account of this if you move into such an area. One thing that sold me on this farm when I first looked at it was the dam. I saw that it was a big dam. I could see that the catchment was in good order, that it needed the drainage lines to be cleared out. So we sent a bobcat through them, basically, to which is like it had a bulldozer attachment on, or he used his bucket as a bulldozer and basically went through and bulldozed the drainage lines going into the dam. You've got to think of these things. You've got to think that it's all work, it's all money, okay, and you've either got to do it yourself or you've got to pay somebody else to do it. It's not that simple. If you have a piece of land and you're thinking that you're going to go there when the apocalypse happens, it's not going to work that way. You have to move on to the land now, and you have to begin working the land now. Okay, and now, 6 years later, I'm just beginning to get the place into a state where it might be beginning to recover. But even then, I'm thinking, gosh, those what we farm here is we farm cactuses, specifically nopal prickly pears, the sort that you eat. It's a perfect climate for growing nopal here, okay? And also agave americana, because it's really, really sought after as they're called architectural plants. And the varieties that I've been able to source have the beautiful striped leaves. And eventually, in probably about 3 or 4 years' time, when they start to get enormous, they will have pups, and I will be able to dig the pups up and sell them, and that will be really good. And I consider those agaves and those nopal prickly pears to be my livestock. And other farmers come here sometimes, and I say to them, they might be doing a delivery and they might not be too careful with their driving. And I say, watch out for those cactuses. They're my livestock, okay? And you've got to, and there's other cactuses as well, mostly that are of the sort that you would buy in a garden shop. And that's my plan in the long run, is to get a cactus nursery happening, so that when people need to come and buy wholesale cactuses, that they'll be able to come and we'll be able to walk around the farm, and they'll be able to pick up a fine example of the livestock and put it in their vehicle and take it away. And but all of that's a few years down the track because these cactuses take a long time to grow. You've got to take account of these things. You know, yes, their land, my land, is ideal for my purpose. Could I put a wheat crop in here? No, I couldn't. It's eucalyptus forest, and that's been tried before. The people who first developed this farm cut down all the eucalyptus trees and tried to put sheep on here, and that failed.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. Class, there's an interesting 2-day regional conference, March 8 and 9, in West Plains, Missouri. March 8 and 9, West Plains, Missouri. Joel Salatin is going to bring Polyface to you, to West Plains, Missouri. And we're going to learn about farming. The conference is called Bringing Back the American Small Farm. That's what we have. We have here in Missouri, our farm is the American Small Farm, 241 acres. And we farm grass, and we raise cows, and we have a garden, and that's what we do. And I'm interested in seeing what others recommend for, you know, maximizing the farm, doing the best we can to protect and safeguard the land and the environment. We think we do a pretty good job, but I think there's a lot to learn. So I plan on attending this 2-day conference, Bringing Back the American Small Farm. The website, AmericanSmallFarm.com. If you want more information, you can call Patrice Jennings, 417-293-0590. 417-293-0590. And I plan on being there. So just wanted to let you know. Also, Guineith, I took a quick look at the cryptos. Just as a heads up, class, Bitcoin is at $92.99. Actually, it's
wow.
90. Yeah,
that's nice.
Up 9% since yesterday. Bitcoin Cash at $13.48, up 10.35% since yesterday. Ethereum, $9.13, up 8.81%. And the winner is Litecoin at $2.08, up 32.75. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. No, that's very nice. Yep. And, I knew that it would do this. I was actually looking at my Bitcoin charts on TradingView.com and doing my analysis, and I was saying to myself just today, this is just absolutely on the point of being such a massive breakout.
Yep.
And it's happened. And I'm really happy about that. And now probably what you'll see is it has a steady climb to about 13,500, 13,800 or thereabouts. Okay? And then you'll find that it has a bit of a pullback, but I don't think you'll see it under 10,000 again. And then the pullback should be quite short, and then it will be a steady climb to about $20,000 for Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not going away. It is being installed, okay? What we are facing, what we're seeing here is a very, very similar situation to what happened 100 years ago when the US dollar as a fiat currency was introduced, when the Federal Reserve was established. The banksters of the day made a big show of being so opposed to the US dollar when in reality they were actually the ones who were installing it. And I don't know this for sure, but I'm kind of getting deja vu here. And, thinking that maybe the banksters are actually setting up Bitcoin to replace what they know to be a dying currency. so that they don't have hundreds of millions of Americans and other people around the world starving to death. And this is how they think. They think if you're clever enough to get into something like Bitcoin, then you deserve to live. But if you're too dumb to see what's happening, then you... this is their opinion, not my opinion, okay? You deserve to be led like a sheep to the slaughter. Mm-hmm. That's
now,
their
Guineith,
opinion,
I don't
my
want,
opinion.
I don't want people to think we are anti-alt currency. We're not.
No.
However,
on the contrary, no. I mine Bitcoin.
Yeah, but we are not giving out... We're not giving out financial advice,
That's
class.
Right. We're not giving out financial advice.
Do your
We're
own research.
Educating on the history of currency here.
Yeah, Guineith, we're out of time.
This has all happened before.
We're out of time.
Oh, gosh.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
Thanks so much for being with us.